Hi, welcome to our inaugural, I can't speak this afternoon, Glasgow Loves EU lockdown chat. Tonight, we're very happy to welcome Patrick Harvie to discuss a few issues with us, and he's on screen. Patrick, and I'll say a few words about him in a minute. And we've also got our technical producer, Bernd, who's sitting there with the professional headphones on, and Jenny, who'll be popping up every now and again. She's monitoring your questions, and she'll be feeding in any nice comments and questions that come up as we go along. And I'm Dee from Glasgow Loves EU. Okay. One of the things that I'd like to stress is that our group has always been very pan-political, cross-party, and we want to kind of keep it that way. So obviously that means it doesn't mean we can't discuss party political issues, but we'd like to make sure that our discourse is always thoughtful and we remain respectful of each other's views, and that applies to anything you write as well as anything you want to say. Hope that's okay. Anyway, Patrick, welcome.
Thank you.
If you don't know him, which I'm sure is unlikely, Patrick has been an MSP for 17 years and is co-convener of the Scottish Green Party. He has a great deal of experience and a wide range of political interests, evidenced by his participation in Holyrood committees on topics ranging from renewables, LGBTI+, international development and Europe, which is our main concern today, to end of life, tourism, WASPI and food. Food being something we'll talk about later on. So, Patrick, do you want to say anything before we start, or shall I go straight into the first question?
Well, just to thank you very much for inviting me to take part in the discussion, and the pan-political or the pan-party political nature of the discussion is well understood. I'm very happy to respect that.
Thank you. That's great. I think you know, a lot of us are probably quite green on the inside, but you know, maybe haven't actually signed up. You know, if you know
whereas
what I mean.
us, we watermelons are usually accused of being green on the outside and red on the inside.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Very happy to own that stereotype.
Watermelons, I'll remember that one. Okay, so obviously, as our group is called Glasgow Loves EU, and if you've been following us for any amount of time, you know that one of our main things is that we fought to try and educate and participate and you know, change things and try and get things reversed, but obviously that didn't happen. And some of you may have been at our event on the 31st January. Patrick, I think you were there and you spoke for us that night. And our Leave a Light On event, which was our kind of last great hurrah. And what we didn't know then was that we had the kind of pandemic heading our way already at that point, which is quite scary to think about, given that there were so many of us there. So the first thing we plan to talk about tonight is the thorny question of the transition period with the EU that we're currently in. So the formal question is, given Gove's tweet on Friday, how serious do you think Westminster is about getting a deal with the EU? And today's Boris comment, a bit of oomph, will his bit of oomph get us across the line? Do you think the public is even remotely well informed about the impact of no deal, which is likely to both amplify and be partially hidden by the economic pain of COVID-19? If not, how can we address that? And most importantly for us here in Scotland, given the way that the three devolved administrations have been treated by Westminster, how can we make our voices heard? How can the nations and the leaders of our nations make our voices heard to put our perspective on this? So that's loads of questions bundled up in one topic, but
well, yeah, I mean, it's easy to be distracted by the sort of sound bites that come from the likes of Boris Johnson. He's very good at, you know, lobbing in a phrase that would have been fine in a spectator opinion piece, but has no real substance in terms of politics. You know, I think you know, he's throwing around these phrases like let's put a tiger in the tank of the negotiations, and you know, it's meaningless. It's just rhetoric for the sake of playing to his own gallery. Far more dangerous is the clear willingness of many people inside the UK government to accept either a no deal or what's now being called a low deal the most minimal level of relationship. And it comes back to the fundamental contradictions in the Leave campaign. They were promising all of the good stuff and none of the bad stuff in a future relationship, and they're now unwilling to choose between the quite reasonable options that the EU is setting out. You either have a close relationship, which means lots of market access and a good degree of alignment, or you have a distant relationship without the alignment, with all of that taking back control, but with much less market access. You can't have it both ways, and the UK government still seems unwilling to make that choice. So, I mean, there is very little chance that they can have the full meaning of what is usually called a comprehensive free trade agreement in place on the timescale they're now committing to. They may well be able to achieve something, but it will be something so limited and caveated that it will still be extremely damaging. The questions about an extension, it is a source of frustration that the main opposition party at Westminster haven't been more forthright in calling for an extension. But I can kind of understand that they may just have taken the view the government has a majority, they are not going to budge on that. We'll be wasting our time in calling for it. And they don't want just to shout into an echo chamber. They actually...
Literally, because there's hardly anybody in there.
well, yeah, that wasn't intended. But yeah, I can understand why it may be more attractive to them in 4 or 5 months' time to be in the position of saying, we told you so, rather than thinking that the UK government will actually change its position now. Either of those is still putting party positioning ahead of the interests of the country, though. When it comes down to the questions about how Scotland and the other devolved areas as well, because this applies in Wales as well. This is not just about the fact that Scotland voted Remain. Wales voted by majority for Leave, but their interests are still being put very much into question, the nature of devolution. And that's why the Welsh government as well as the Scottish government have called for an extension. But how to assert that national interest, that the interest of some of the regions of England as well, which don't have a political voice, this is a fundamental question. And acknowledging that there will be people who support Glasgow Loves EU, who are broadly content with the UK's internal constitutional arrangements, I can't help but thinking that whatever position you have on Scottish independence, the lack of a balanced political voice within these islands is part of the brokenness of what the UK's constitution is. I've never pretended that independence is a quick and easy solution to that from Scotland's point of view. It is a path we have open to us as an option that we can take. But I also have a great deal of empathy for the people in other parts of England, for example, regions which will be desperately hardly hit by the economic damage, that have no political voice of their own. Later this week I'll be taking part in the European External Affairs Committee meeting, hearing from Mike Russell, the committee in the Scottish Parliament, working remotely from home as our committees are doing at the moment. But that will be looking at the negotiation process and hearing the latest response from the Scottish government to where things stand. I'm afraid the hard answer may well be that the UK government will continue to commit to the most damaging path and to a lack of recognition of the views of the nations and regions which have been expressed so far.
I think sadly you're probably right, and it's something they're kind of talking about, or people in the region. So you've got Andy Burnham in Manchester, and you've got people in the northeast, and even like Devon and Cornwall and places of having some sort of proper, and the Midlands, proper recognition for their areas, their specific areas, as well as being part of the UK as a whole. So that's Not particularly, not particularly. It's not going to change things, but at least we've aired that a bit. Jenny, have we? Sorry, go on.
The instinct with these kind of discussions is always that you want to offer kind of hope and an upbeat assessment. I do think that we're in a very dangerous position now, and there are people in the UK government who seem to have decided, let's just roll up the economic damage of Brexit into the economic damage that comes from the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And find that as a way to kind of hide the one inside the other, as though it isn't happening. Yeah. But the economic damage of Brexit will be decades long. It will be for the long term. It won't just be for the, however many months or years it is for recovery from the pandemic. This will be with us for the long term, and it will be bad for the long term if we can't try and find a way to achieve the close relationship that will be in the mutual interests of Scotland, the UK, and the EU.
Yeah, because I'm picking all those years of kind of integration of all sorts of things from like food labeling, which we'll get onto a bit later on the food stuff, and education, recognition of qualifications, and so many things, data, all sorts of things are involved, and people just don't even think about it. All they get is like a headline thing. They don't really go into the detail.
Sure.
So, Jenny, have we had any? You're muted at the moment, so have we got any comments or questions?
Yeah. Well, Fiona Smith has said she can't believe how sad she is about the loss of her children's EU citizenship. So, big changes for the young people who didn't actually vote for Brexit. And I was just hearing Patrick mentioning the tiger in the tank thing there. Boris's phrase, but was it Charles Michel today said he wants to put a tiger in the tank, but he can't even put a pig in a poke. I love that the EU negotiators are even better at our idioms than.
Well, you're probably too young to remember, but tiger in the tank was an old strapline for a commercial for a petrol company back in the day. I'm pretty sure it was when I was a kid. They used to put a tiger in your tank, and it was one of the big. I can't remember which one it was, but one of the big petrol companies, and they had a tiger as their logo, and it was put a tiger in your tank to make you go. And they probably have tiger toys to make kids go, "Oh, please, can we go to the tiger garage, Daddy?"
We've got a comment just through from Victoria, who I think is with the Sterling Group.
Oh, okay. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, Victoria. Yep. She's saying, is there anything we can do in the face of what seems like criminal mismanagement by UK government driving us to no deal, which was repeatedly expressly ruled out? So that's quite a good comment.
The answer to that is probably no, but sadly.
Well, there does need to be an attempt to hold the government to account. That's easier said than done, of course, in a political system that is designed to give a parliamentary majority to a party that gets a minority of the votes. So I'm not suggesting that it's easily done, but the consequences of what they're doing, of the agenda that they're pursuing, will be very, very real for people. And I think as the months move on, and as there is some kind of attempt to begin to let society and economy recover from the lockdown, the way that Brexit continues to compound the damage and prevent any kind of meaningful recovery will be very apparent to people. And I think we need to commit ourselves to exposing that and holding the UK government accountable for those actions. And I think if anything will make them shift their position, it will be the public opinion in the kind of areas where they won Tory seats for the first time or for the first time in many, many years, that kind of new constituency that they need to appeal to if they want to continue to win majorities. I hope that they never win a majority again for all of the things that they're doing wrong. But they know that they need to appeal to those people, and those are the people who are going to be suffering not just direct economic damage, but compounding the economic damage of the pandemic as a result of this Brexit course. So we have a responsibility and an opportunity to continue to expose that and hold them to account for the actions that they're pursuing.
Yeah, so we'll keep going, and we'll keep trying to share information around to people and keep writing to MPs and all the rest of the things that we do, and encouraging other people to do that. I think petitions kind of, I've read somewhere that petition, we share them, we sign them, but they do nothing because they've already pre-decided most of it anyway, and you just get a stock answer, because if it's anything about this, they go, well, Britain's already left the EU, it's like, what are you sending us a petition for, sort of thing. Anyway, shall we move on to another topic, which is kind of tangentially related, because it kind of moves us into an area related, which is that obviously particularly if we get a really bad deal with, or no deal with the EU, we're going to be even more dependent on a good deal with the US. So the main topic that's come out of that people are aware of is the business about food standards. So with or without an extension, the likelihood is that the UK will be making a deal with the US. What are your views on the difference in food standards and packaging regulations? And that's kind of important, because there's all this talk now that, because I put a post up and lots of people went, oh, but it's all right, I won't buy American chicken. I'll look on the label, and if it doesn't say American, then I'll buy it. But that's all going to be hidden, isn't it? There's ways around it that they won't have to actually admit that it's American chicken. And how do you know what chicken you're buying when you go to a takeaway or unless they actually specifically state that it's Scottish chicken or Newcastle. Newcastle chicken's a funny idea, isn't it? Farmers. That's the next, the other related issue here. What would be the impact on our farmers of having to import US produce? And what can Hollywood do to protect the interests of Scottish farmers?
Yeah.
If anything.
This is a profoundly important issue, and I think it's reasonable to begin with a recognition that Europe isn't perfect either.
Of course, yeah.
From a few years ago with the meat scandals around mislabeling and products going into the food chain that should never have been there in the first place. But that also brought people much more awareness of quite how long and convoluted these supply chains are, particularly in terms of things like processed meat going into processed food, where you don't have a label on a piece of meat that says where it's produced. You have that as one ingredient in a product. And so that really does diminish people's ability to make meaningful choices. And what we're clear about is the US's negotiating priorities will be to remove market barriers to food that's produced in standards, in conditions that would not meet our current standards, which derive from the European Union and which have kept people safe. They also want to do away with some of the other protections for things like designated origin status, the kind of products that in Scotland people mostly associate with things like whiskey, but actually cover a whole host of different products which have that protected designated origin status. And that's a way of ensuring that local producers who have something unique to put on the market are not going to be undercut by a copycat product. There's a whole host of areas where this intersects between devolved and reserved responsibilities as well, because a lot of those issues around agriculture and environment do fall within the remit of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government. But the negotiating of a trade deal is a reserved matter. So the making of that deal is reserved, but the contents of it will impact on many, many devolved areas. Now, a lot of other countries would have a decentralized decision making. They would not have one central government that just makes all of the decisions, but you actually have to go through the process of negotiating internally, of approving, negotiating mandates, draft texts, and then signing off a trade deal that was done. The UK doesn't have that. The UK has centralized a lot of this authority and is in a position of being able to override, not even override, but just point blank ignore the positions of the Welsh Assembly, the Northern Irish Assembly, the Welsh Parliament, the Northern Irish Assembly and the Scottish Parliament, as well as the local level. So there's a real danger that we have issues around trade deals being imposed on us, which constrain the power of the Scottish Parliament to act on any of those consumer rights issues. Just take some of the really important steps we've taken in terms of public health, things like minimum pricing, which was taken into the courts. You could have something like that determined by an anonymous panel of corporate lawyers under one of these trade deals, preventing a democratically elected government from doing something that's in the interest of public health because it's seen as against market competition. And the dispute resolution procedures in a lot of these trade deals, modern trade deals, really does just transfer a lot of what should be democratically accountable power toward anonymous panels of lawyers. And so, we absolutely need to assert, and we'll probably need to do that quite aggressively, being willing to go to court to assert the right of the devolved administrations to do the things that they've been elected to do, to make decisions that they've been elected to make, rather than having our authority constrained by a trade deal signed off by the UK government without any kind of input or consent. That notion of consent, where if you want to achieve a common position across the UK, you negotiate it together between the different governments within the UK, you achieve consent, and then you implement it. That would be reasonable, but what we're likely to see is a tussle between that kind of model and the idea of the UK government simply imposing common positions on everybody without any negotiation or consent.
Yes, it's a very kind of scary area, and I don't know if I should mention fish, because I don't really get the fish thing, but I know the fish thing is a tiny amount of the actual economic thing, but I know that it's a very emotive thing for the fishing areas. Obviously, we've got fishing areas in Scotland, lots of them.
I mean, the frustration with that from a green point of view is that, inside the EU, outside the EU, with a deal, without a deal, you've still got the same basic problem, which is that you have a marine environment that has to be managed in a collaborative, cooperative way, because it doesn't split down borders.
Exactly. There are no lines in the sea. There are no borders in the sea. For the fish. The fish don't know there's a border.
And
which is what I've always found really weird.
Committee the other week kept coming down to this kind of issue about the two sides being the UK's negotiating position and the EU's negotiating position. And from a green point of view, the two sides in this debate are the humans and the fish.
Yes, exactly.
or the humans and the marine environment, which is under profound threat and has been severely depleted. There has been change gradually and too late, but there has been substantial change toward reorienting the way that we do this management of this shared asset into one that's about environmental protection and allowing species to recover. We haven't gone far enough in that direction, in my view, but we've started to make progress to it. And now you've got people in the UK government and some of their supporters in the Scottish Parliament who seem to want to say that the only thing that should be achieved is allowing our fishermen to go out and catch as much as they want. That is not just unsustainable, but it's not even in their interests in the long term, because the more you deplete those stocks, the less of a viable future a fishing community will have.
There's also an irony that most of the fish, I believe that a lot of the fish that we catch in this country we export to the EU, because we don't eat that much fish in this country. So basically the way to get around this American thing is to turn like fish and vegetable eating and forget about the meat.
Well, I mean, yes, there's a huge environmental and ethical interest in trying to shift toward more sustainable food patterns generally. But for as long as there is a fishing industry, there is, you're right, an economic connection between access to waters and access to markets for the products. And again, it's a situation where the UK government seems to want to have its cake and eat it.
Well, yeah, they're always guilty of cakeism, and which was a neologism coined during the Brexit days, I think. I'm going to skip my next question because oh, sorry, Jenny, is there anything from you? I've written your name down 4 times to remember to ask you.
We've had an interesting comment from Fiona. Just we always think about the fishermen, but I think one of her family members, her son, I think, is a UK seafarer, and they're having problems landing their goods at EU ports, given that, as we're no longer in the EU, well, they're obviously being told that, although the transition should still be working. But and there's also problems with the contracts because of COVID. So it seems to be a dreadful mix of situations and a direct result of us leaving the EU. So she's just come in here. Let me just see. So I think basically there's problems. The contracts when they're being paid is not matching up. So yeah, maybe. I don't know who's responsible. Is that Scottish or is that UK responsibility? That type of thing. Scottish government or UK government?
I mean, if it's about trying to make sure that the EU member states or other European countries are treating fishing boats or seafarers from Scotland and the UK in the way that they should, that would be about the negotiation between the UK as the ex-member state and the EU. But it just comes back to this whole situation that it was inevitable that there would be a mess come out of this, and whether that's about misunderstanding, whether it's about people being too enthusiastic to protect their own interests and seeing Brexit as an opportunity to do that. Brexit was never going to be a clean, simple, straightforward process. It was always going to give rise to confusion, chaos, and mess.
I was thinking, I read a book about, one of these very many books there are about a brain surgeon talking about, his life and work. And I always kind of imagine it a bit like trying to extract a lump from somebody's brain and disentangle it from all the connections there are to, into and out of it. So, and trying to actually take one bit out carefully and anyway.
Dee, can I just add in just for further information? I probably didn't say there, but it's like tankers and things like that was the type of seafaring that they were talking about.
Yeah.
So all those goods that are being delivered. Yeah.
I think people don't.
If we ever do need brain surgery, it won't be in the hands of Michael Gove and Boris Johnson.
Oh God. No, well, we won't get onto science and all of that. Okay, before we go, we want to bring up a topic that we've talked about a lot on this forum and in all our campaigning, particularly in Glasgow, Buchanan Street in particular. We met so many EU citizens who are living here, and almost to a person, they love living in Scotland and they love Scotland. And chose to come and make it their home, and we're just heartbroken for them and for things like which I'm going to read you out in a second. So the actual question is, and it kind of leads on to the other topic of the moment as well, which we have some comments on as well. Scotland is an open and welcoming country, but what more can we do to help protect our EU citizens and tackle all forms of racism and discrimination? And I'll just read you a little bit. I don't know if you've seen this report in the Helensburgh Advertiser, and it's just particular to them, and they said hundreds of EU nationals living in Helensburgh and Argyll and Bute are in limbo over whether they can stay in the country according to new figures. And one of our colleagues looked at all the figures, but I'll just quote the ones from there. The latest stats show that 1,700 people have applied for permanent residency in the area and 920 have been given settled status, but hundreds of others have been classed as pre-settled, meaning they have to reapply within 5 years or be forced to leave the UK. The figures show that a total of 770 out of that 1,700 are left in limbo pending applications or are pre-settled. And then it's got figures from the Western Partnership. There are figures everywhere, but there's so many people. However you look at it, however many hundreds or thousands or whatever there are, these people, their lives are in limbo. So they're in. I don't know if you saw that sitting in limbo, the Windrush thing the other night on BBC about the guy who was a Windrush came over. He didn't. I don't know if he came actually on the Windrush, but the whole process he went through of being arrested and had his whole life kind of disrupted, lost his home, and was on the point of deportation. But
I haven't watched it yet.
It's really good.
On the iPlayer, but
yeah. but it kind of seems that this could be like the EU version of Windrush in the end.
I mean, the thing is, in many ways, this has been a very, very long time coming. I don't think I can remember a time in my life when you didn't have this kind of competition between the UK government and the media about who could be nastiest about foreigners. And government after government after government of different political complexions has tried to make the immigration and the asylum system ever more humiliating, bureaucratic, and Echo, be quiet. To manage your video skills. I'm very sorry about that.
That's quite all right. It's not a dog or a child, so it's okay.
My not very smart speaker has decided to interrupt. So we have these systems, immigration and asylum, which have become steadily more brutal and unwelcoming. And a great many more people, as a result of Brexit, are finding themselves thrown into this system and treated unfairly in this system. In a little bit similar to the way that the pandemic has thrown so many more people into the social security system. It no longer is something abstract that they can hear about in the media or the newspapers. It's something that's directly impacting their lives. The same thing is true of the immigration system, with many, many more people being part of that. Now, we obviously are seeing a complete failure of the strategy that some have pursued of let's just throw a bit more red meat at the anti-immigrant sentiment in society in the hope that it goes away. It was never likely to work. It hasn't worked. It's made the problem worse. And every time governments have tried making the immigration system a bit more brutal, there's been ever more demands to be even more racist, even more anti-immigrant. So that kind of agenda is never going to be successful. But we also, I think, have to stop talking about these numbers in abstract terms. Even if the example you gave is talking about hundreds of people in a local area, we need to start talking about this in terms of real people's stories. People can relate to an individual story about their kid's teacher, or about a nurse in the local hospital, or about the hairdresser that they know. If we tell these stories in personal terms, in ways that are relatable, that remind us that we're talking about human beings and people's lives, I think that's so much more powerful in terms of turning the tide and trying to remind people that we're all human beings, that we relate to one another because we are fundamentally connected. We share this world, and we share this little bit of this world. We're seeing this in the context of the outright fascist violence that we saw on the streets of Glasgow over this weekend, and other parts of the UK as well, where the anger of people who were effectively promised that they would have a more racist Britain if they voted for Brexit. The kind of rhetoric that not just the Nigel Farages, but the mainstream Leave campaign was selling people, amounted to, vote for this and you can get rid of the foreigners. There was a shameful strand of racism that ran right through the Brexit campaign. The people who bought that, the people who voted for that, are not going to be happy if they're now expected to have a situation that's more humane. So if we want that more humane system, we really need to tell this story in a different way, in a way that connects with people. And I think that has to be about individual lives and life circumstances in a way that people can relate to. I think we need to stop talking about the numbers, stop talking about this in an abstract way, and much more clearly communicate about people, about people's lives, and those individual perspectives that everyone can relate to.
Yeah, it's hard though, because you know, a lot of those people won't really want to listen, I don't think. And I mean, what you're saying is how they've been approaching the COVID thing, because every night the news is wall to wall individual stories of people and families, and which is great, but it actually gets quite tiring to watch, because they're just all, you know, they're all quite similar in a way, aren't they? And you know, so you know, I do know what you're saying. I do think statistics are very, very cold, and
you know, it affects that kind of sense of being tired of it. It affects every part of this question about discrimination and prejudice in our society. You know, if you look at the Black Lives Matter movement in the US in particular, you have people who've been campaigning on these issues for years,
decades.
Yeah. And you have people who are not campaigners who've been dealing with police brutality every day of their lives, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, and who have to pass on that knowledge about how you handle yourself when there are police around generationally to their kids.
Yeah.
You know, we should acknowledge they're tired. They're tired, sick to death of that situation. If you look at the relentless tirade of hostility toward trans people in this country, in certain parts of the press, trans people are tired of being treated that way. And yes, people who are affected by the immigration and asylum system in this country, including EU citizens, are absolutely sick to death of this. They're tired of it, and it's asking a lot to keep on trying to get over the ignorance that has allowed this situation to be brought about. But if we give up on doing that, the people who want to double down on a more brutal and xenophobic system will be laughing all the way to the next election. So we can't give up on it, and we do need to keep on reminding each other and other people around us in our communities that this is about people's lives. This is about human beings, and talking about this issue in a relatable way.
Jenny, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Topically, European Movement in Scotland are just flagging up that they have a webinar on the 25th of June on EU 27 citizens' rights. So that should be interesting. I think they've got an Eventbrite link or on their Facebook. But if anyone is struggling to find them, just get in touch with us and we can put them through.
Well, I think we've put it on our page, and we'll put it on again, I'm sure. And I'm sure our Twitterati will be tweeting it as well. It is, the whole thing is you know, that issue is so depressing, the whole thing. But we will keep fighting. We're not gonna give up. We're not gonna give up. We want the Scotland that we love to be the open and welcoming society that everybody, I think pretty much everybody I ever spoke to in Buchanan Street told me how wonderful they think Scotland is, and I feel the same as a incomer as well.
Well, that's heartening to know.
My life is a wonderful life up here. Love it very much. Anyway, we've gone a bit over our time, so we probably should wrap up now. And there are loads more things that we'd love to talk to you about, and but maybe another time. Maybe we'll have you back another time if you
be other opportunity.
Come back.
Thank you very much for having me this evening.
Yes, you know, COP26, for example, proportional representation, which you kind of touched on obliquely, and universal basic income, which I watched you do a thing on, which was really interesting. Something I'm very interested in, because I think that would kind of perhaps solve a lot of the issues that we have at the moment. But anyway, they're there for another day. But we really appreciate your time coming along, and thank you very much. And I'm going to raise my little Hollywood glass with a wee dram in it to you, because I got that out specially to say cheers. Thank you for all you're doing.
A glass of French wine back at you.
French wine and Scotch whiskey. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And that's great. Thanks.